I was already in my jacket, keys in hand, when Tessa stepped into the hallway and said, "You always do this right before it gets good." I stopped with one foot pointed toward the door. The kind of stop that's involuntary, like someone grabbed the back of your collar. She was standing there in her socks, arms crossed loosely, not angry, just noticing. That was the part that got me. She wasn't trying to start something. She was just telling me what she saw. "Do what?" I asked. "Leave." She tilted her head toward the living room behind her. "Every time the night slows down, you're gone." I laughed a little. It came out the wrong shape, too quick, too flat. "It's 11 o'clock on a Saturday. That's not early." It is when the conversation just started being real. Inside, my coworker Derek's apartment had shifted into that quieter version of itself. Earlier, it had been easy. People standing in clusters with bottles in their hands, talking loud over a playlist nobody agreed on, the TV on in the background with no one watching it. I had been fine then. Talked to people, laughed at the right moments, refilled my drink twice. I had even helped Derek's girlfriend carry plates from the kitchen without being asked. Then it got late. The playlist faded to one speaker. People found seats. Derek started telling this story about his father, something long and complicated about a camping trip that went wrong when Derek was 12. And everyone leaned in a little. One of the girls from accounting sat down on the floor and pulled her knees to her chest and said, "My dad did the exact same thing once." And the whole room went softer. That's when I looked at my phone, said I had an early morning, and headed for the door. Nobody followed me except Tessa. She was Derek's cousin, in town for a graduate school interview at Northwestern. I had known her the way you know someone who's always mentioned but never quite there. Derek had a cousin who was getting her master's in environmental law. Derek had a cousin who once drove from Cleveland to Denver alone because she felt like it. I had met her maybe twice at things like this before tonight. Never more than 5 minutes at a time. "I don't know you well enough for you to be analyzing me," I said. She smiled. "It wasn't unkind? You don't have to know someone well to see a pattern." I put my hands in my jacket pockets. "What pattern?" "You were fine for the first 3 hours," she said. "You were actually fun. Then Derek starts a real story and you check your phone like it's a fire alarm." The thing was, she wasn't wrong. She was so not wrong that I couldn't even form a sentence around it. I just stood there in the hallway of Derek's apartment building, with the overhead light flickering slightly above us, the way lights in old buildings always do. "People get tired," I said. "It's not a syndrome." I didn't say it was. She leaned against the wall. "I'm just saying you left at the most interesting part." I looked toward the elevator. The button was still lit from whoever had come up earlier. I thought about pressing it. I thought about how easy the drive home would be, how good it would feel to get in my car and let the quiet settle around me. "I'm not a group feelings kind of person," I said. "Nobody asked you to cry." "Then what are you?" 10 more minutes. She said it like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "Go back in. You don't have to say a single word. Just sit there." "That's not advice, that's a hostage situation." She laughed then, quick and genuine, and I felt something loosen in my chest by about 1 notch. "It's a dare," she said. 10 minutes. If it's awful, you have a story." I looked at the elevator, I looked at her. She was watching me with this calm, direct expression that I couldn't quite put into a category. Not flirting, not mothering, not judging. Just paying attention in a way that most people didn't bother with. I said, "You don't know what you're assuming. Then prove me wrong. Go back in." I went back in. Nobody made it weird. That was the strangest part. Derek looked up from the couch and said, "Thought you left." I said I forgot my phone charger. He pointed toward the kitchen and turned back to his story. I found a spot on the arm of the chair near the window and stayed there while the room talked and laughed and got quieter and then louder again. Tessa came back in after me and sat cross-legged on the floor near the coffee table. She didn't look over at me once. 10 minutes became 30, 30 became past midnight. At some point I stopped tracking it. When people finally started leaving for real, I left with them. Tessa was in the kitchen helping Derek's girlfriend with cups. I found my actual jacket, not a fake excuse this time, and headed for the door. She caught me on the way out. "You stayed. You dared me. You still could have left." "I know." I pulled the jacket on. "Tell Derek thanks." She looked at me like she was deciding something. Then she said, "You're worse at leaving than you think you are." I didn't have anything for that. I just nodded and took the elevator down and sat in my car for a few minutes before I started it. The parking garage was quiet. My phone had a notification about a weather alert I didn't care about. I had stayed, nothing bad had happened. Somehow that felt more complicated than leaving would have. Tessa texted me the next afternoon. I was at the gym in the middle of ignoring leg day when it came through. "For someone who wasn't going to stay, you lasted until 12:40. I stared at it for longer than I should have. It wasn't flirtatious exactly. It wasn't heavy either. It occupied this specific middle space where I couldn't tell if she was teasing me or making a point. Probably both. I typed 3 different replies and deleted all of them. Finally I sent, "Leg day was calling." She answered immediately, "Your calves thank you for abandoning them." I smiled before I could do anything about it. The guy on the bench next to me noticed and gave me a look. I put my phone away and did the leg press and thought about her longer than made sense. She was in town for another week before her interview. Derek mentioned it at work on Monday while we were grabbing coffee from the break room. Not in any significant way, just Tessa's staying through Thursday, might do dinner Wednesday if you're around. I said sure without thinking about whether I meant it. Wednesday she was already at the restaurant when I got there. A place called Olive and June on Halstead, exposed brick, the kind of menus that are printed on craft paper. She had her coat over the back of her chair and was reading something on her phone with a small frown that disappeared when she saw me come in. "You showed up," she said. I said I would. People say a lot of things. We ordered. She got the salmon. I got a burger because I didn't feel like pretending. The conversation moved through the usual early stuff. Where she grew up, how she ended up in environmental law, what she thought of Chicago versus Columbus where she was currently. Then it shifted. She talked about the interview the next day with this careful steadiness that I recognized as someone who was nervous but wasn't going to say so. "What happens if you get in?" I asked. "Then I move here in August, and if you don't?" She turned her water glass slightly on the table. "Then I figure something else out." That doesn't sound like a plan, it's a working plan. She looked up. I've learned not to over-engineer things. Last time I had a 5-year plan, I spent 3 of those years keeping the wrong job because I'd decided it was part of the plan. I thought about that. "You quit?" "I left," she said. "After a long time of staying for the wrong reasons." "What were the wrong reasons?" She was quiet for a second. Not evasive, just thinking. I didn't want to admit I'd made a bad call. It's easier to keep going than to turn around and tell people you took a wrong turn. I understood that more than I wanted to say right there. We split the check without arguing about it. Outside it was that mid-October cold that comes off the lake like it has a grudge. She had her coat buttoned and her hands in her pockets. We stood on the sidewalk for a second with people moving past us. "Good luck tomorrow," I said. "Thank you." She smiled. It was different from the one at Derek's. Softer, less defended. "You're easier to talk to than I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who would have checked their phone 4 times during dinner." I had checked it once. I didn't mention that. "When do you find out?" I asked. "They said 2 weeks. 2 weeks is long. I have reading to fill it." She lifted her chin toward the direction of the L. I'm that way too," I said, which was a lie. My car was 2 blocks in the other direction. She gave me a look that said she knew, but she didn't call it out. We walked to the L station and I waited until she went through the turnstile. She turned and waved once at the top of the stairs, a quick easy thing, and then she was gone. I walked the 2 blocks back to my car in the wrong direction and felt ridiculous in a way that was almost comfortable. She texted from the train. The burger decision was correct. I sent back always. She sent a single thumbs up. That was it. But I was still thinking about it when I got home. The interview was on Thursday. I didn't ask Derek how it went because I didn't want to seem like I was asking. On Friday morning, a text came from a number that wasn't in my contacts. Then I realized it was. I had saved her number after Derek's party without fully admitting to myself that I had. "They're letting me know in 2 weeks. I think it went okay." The panel asked good questions. I was at my desk at work, halfway through a project that was due by 3. I typed back, "Good questions usually mean they were paying attention. Or they were being polite. You'll know the difference when you find out." That's annoyingly optimistic for 9 a.m. I have coffee. It changes things. There was a pause, then I leave Sunday. Derek's doing some farewell thing Saturday night if you're around. I was around. I had nothing on Saturday. I knew that without checking. But I sat there with my thumbs over the screen and felt that old pressure behind my sternum, the one that said, "Don't tell her that. Don't be too available. Keep some of this and lock it where it's safe." "Yeah," I sent back. "Probably." She replied with "Probably is doing a lot of work there." And I didn't answer because I didn't know what to say that wasn't too much. Saturday came. Derek's place again, smaller group this time. 9 or 10 people, mostly people who knew Tessa from her previous visits, a couple I didn't recognize. I got there at 8, which was not early by most standards but was, according to Derek, 45 minutes earlier than my usual arrival at any event where I might want to leave. "You're practically here at daybreak," he said when he opened the door. "It's 8 o'clock. For you, that's sunrise." He let me in and handed me a beer from the refrigerator like it was a formality. "She'll be back after 9. She's dropping off some stuff at a friend's place." I don't know who Derek thought he was fooling, and I don't know who I thought I was fooling either. The group that night was easier. People who actually liked each other in a simple, uncomplicated way. A woman named Harriet who worked with Derek and could do impersonations of every person in their office. A guy called Spencer who brought a very expensive bottle of wine and then drank most of it himself without apology. The two people I didn't know turned out to be Tessa's friends from college, visiting from out of town to see her before she went back to Columbus. Tessa walked in at 9:15. She had her hair different from Wednesday, down instead of up, and she was wearing a blue sweater the color of faded denim. She came in saying something to her college friends and laughed at something one of them said before she even had her coat off. Then she looked over and saw me. "You came," she said. "You said Saturday." I also said probably. Probably means maybe. Yes, everyone knows that. She smiled and hung her coat over the chair. Her college friends were already asking her something and she turned to answer them. But for a second she looked back at me with an expression I couldn't translate fast enough. The night moved the way good nights do when you're not trying to manage them. Loud, then quieter, then loud again in a different key. Harriet did her impressions. Spencer opened a second bottle. Tessa's friends talked about a road trip they were planning that sounded completely unrealistic and completely like something they would actually do. Around 10:30, the couch filled up and the conversation slowed into something warmer. People traded stories that started out funny and ended up real. One of Tessa's college friends talked about her dad being sick. Spencer, surprisingly, talked about a job he'd quit 3 years ago and how it had taken him a long time to stop feeling like a failure for it. I felt the old reflex, the check your phone feeling, the keys in my jacket pocket feeling, the voice that said, "This is the part where you don't belong. This is the part where someone looks over and realizes you're not actually one of them." I looked at the door. Tessa appeared next to me from nowhere with a glass of water in her hand. She didn't say anything. She just stood there beside me, close enough that I could smell her shampoo, something that was like cedar and something else I couldn't name. "I know," I said quietly. "I didn't say anything. You were about to. I was going to ask if you wanted water." She held out the glass. I took it. She stayed next to me. We stood there listening to Spencer finish his story, which had a better ending than it had a right to. When he was done, Harriet said, "That took guts," and Spencer shrugged like it hadn't, but you could tell he was glad someone said it. I stayed. Not because Tessa gave me a job to do, not because she dared me this time. I just stayed. She left Sunday the way she'd said she would. I found that out from Derek. I didn't see her go. We had texted a few times Saturday after people left. Nothing heavy, mostly about the wine Spencer had hoarded. She sent me a picture of the highway on ramp Sunday morning with the caption I-90 in the rain. "Very cinematic. Drive safe." She sent a thumbs up. That was it. For the next week and a half, I told myself it was fine. She lived in Columbus. She was waiting to find out about a school in Chicago that might or might not say yes. I wasn't the kind of person who built things on maybes, and even if I was, I didn't know if she was interested in building anything or just interesting by nature. She could just be a person who paid attention to people. Not everyone who noticed you was noticing you specifically. But there was a Thursday night when Derek's office group went to a bar after work, and I sat at the end of the table, watching everyone talk, and realized I was waiting for a specific kind of conversation. Not loud, not performed. The kind that happened in a hallway or outside a corner store, or standing next to someone while the room got quiet around you both. I wasn't waiting for a conversation, I was waiting for her in particular. On Friday I called Derek. "Do you know when Tessa finds out?" I asked, trying to make it sound casual, which I was genuinely bad at. A pause. "About Northwestern?" "Yeah." A longer pause. "She found out yesterday." My stomach dropped a little. "And she got in." He said it like he was watching something. "She's coming back in August." I held the phone against my ear and looked at the wall of my apartment. I had a print on the wall that I'd bought 2 years ago at a street fair because I liked the colors and still hadn't framed. I thought about that for no reason. "That's great," I said. "It is." Another pause. "You could just text her, man," I was asking. "You were doing a thing where you ask questions to avoid doing the actual thing. I've known you for 6 years, you do it with everything." I didn't have a comeback for that. "Text her," Derek said. "I'm not running a relay service for people who are scared of their phones." He hung up. I put mine down on the kitchen counter and looked at it for a while. Then I picked it up and typed. Derek told me, "Congratulations." She answered in about 4 minutes. "Thank you." I cried a little in a grocery store parking lot, which felt very true to my personality. "Which grocery lot?" "Mariano's on Clark." The cashier probably thought I was having a breakdown over guacamole. "Were you?" "A little. Good and bad at once. That's the only way I know how to feel about big things." I read that twice. I knew what she meant. I knew exactly what she meant. I typed, "I'm glad you got in." She typed back, "Me too." "August feels far away." "It's not that far, feels it." I put the phone down, picked it up. Then I wrote something that took me 4 tries to get right. "When you're back, I'd like to take you somewhere that isn't Derek's apartment." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared twice before she answered. "That's a low bar, but yes, I can clear it." "I believe you," she wrote. Then after a second, "I'll let you know when I have a date." I set the phone down on the counter and felt something I hadn't expected, which was calm. Not the kind I usually felt after leaving something. The kind that came from not leaving. August came. She texted me the weekend she moved in, a picture of a half-assembled bookshelf with the caption, "I may have underestimated this." I sent back, "Which step?" She sent a photo of the instruction sheet with a red circle around a step that made no sense to any human being. I offered to come by. She said she had it. 3 hours later, she sent a picture of the bookshelf standing, loaded with books, slightly crooked, with the caption, "I have it." The first time I took her somewhere that wasn't Derek's apartment, it was a place I'd been meaning to go for 2 years, a small jazz bar in Wicker Park that a friend had recommended, before I'd gotten too comfortable avoiding new things. We sat at a corner table and the music was good enough that you could talk over it without effort. She ordered bourbon. I ordered the same and then spent 20 minutes pretending I liked it as much as she did. She noticed. "You hate it." "It's fine. Your face is lying." "My face is being diplomatic." She flagged the server and ordered me a beer without asking what kind. Just described what I'd had at Derek's the first night and the server nodded and I didn't know whether to feel embarrassed or something else. "You remembered that," I said. "I pay attention to people." She set her glass down. "It's a thing I do. I know. Does it bother you?" I thought about it honestly. "It used to." She looked at me. "Used to." "It means someone's watching," I said. "I used to think that was just pressure, something to perform for. And now," I looked at the table, "now it seems like maybe someone just wants to know you, which is different." The music swelled once and then pulled back. She was quiet in the way she got quiet. That meant she heard me. "I'm not very easy," I said. "I know that. Nobody's easy." "I leave," I said, "or I used to, more than I should." "You're here," she said simply, and I was. Not because the night was forced or because she had dared me into it. I was there because I'd spent years making sure nothing could reach me. And somewhere between a hallway at Derek's apartment and a parking lot text and a grocery store with a crying woman and a crooked bookshelf, I had stopped thinking about the door. We closed out the bar. Outside, the Wicker Park block was doing what it did on September Friday nights. Warm enough to stay outside, couples on the sidewalk, a guy on the corner with a guitar and a case with 2 folded bills in it. Tessa stopped to put something in the case. The guitar player thanked her and kept playing without missing a note. We walked toward her car. The street was the kind of lit where everything looked better than it was. "I have a confession," I said. She glanced over. "The first night, at Derek's." I kept my eyes forward. "When you told me to go back in, I was going to leave anyway, I decided." "I know," she said. "Then why?" "Because people who've already decided sometimes just need someone to give them a reason they can say yes to." She unlocked her car without looking at me. "You needed permission more than you needed convincing." I stopped on the sidewalk. She turned and looked at me across the roof of the car. "That's a very specific thing to understand about a person," I said. "You're not hard to read. Everybody else seems to find me pretty hard to read." She tilted her head slightly. Maybe they weren't looking in the right places. I got in the car. She drove me to my place because mine was closer. The same way she had driven to the corner store with Megan, except this was our first real night and there was no storm and no one else and the windows weren't fogged. Just the city going past outside and the radio on low and her hand resting near the gear shift in a way I had been noticing for months. When she pulled up to my building, I didn't get out right away. Old habit of a different kind. "Thank you," I said. "For driving 5 blocks? For the hallway," I said. "All of it." She turned toward me slightly in the seat. The streetlight caught the side of her face. I thought about the first night, how she had stood in Derek's hallway like she had nowhere else to be. Like calling me out was just a thing you did for people you'd already decided were worth it. "I wasn't trying to fix you," she said. "I know. I just thought you were interesting and it seemed like you kept leaving before I could find out if I was right." "Were you?" She smiled the slow way, the real way. "I'll let you know when I've collected enough data." I laughed and got out of the car. She waited until I was at the door before she pulled away. I watched the taillights go and stayed standing there on the step for a second after they disappeared. The night air had that early September edge to it. The first hint of what comes next. I looked up, and the street was the way it always was. Quiet, unremarkable, exactly what it had always been. The only thing different was that for once I was still there to see it.